Thank you so much. My name is Jane Gilly. On behalf of the League of Women Voters and our co-sponsor, the Riverfront Community Group, which includes the area of Riverside, Morgan Park, Gary New Duluth, and Fond du Lac, we welcome you to this evening's 7B District Candidate Forum. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters, and I'll be your moderator for this evening. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan volunteer organization, and while we as a league do study and take stands on issues, we do not support or endorse any political parties or candidates. The views expressed by the candidates tonight are their own and not those of the sponsoring organizations. We do encourage you, as we encourage all of our members as individuals, to become involved in your community and the political party of your choice. To learn more about the League of Women Voters, we have a website at www.lwvduluth.org, or you can stop at our table for more information. It's the purpose of the sponsoring organization to provide you tonight with an opportunity to hear the candidates discuss the issues that are important to you face to face. There's never enough time to cover all the issues in a time-limited setting like this. So if your questions aren't addressed, we urge you to contact the candidates directly. The format for this evening will include an opening statement from each of the candidates, questions from the sponsoring organizations, audience questions, and a statement and a closing statement from each candidate. You were handed a card for candidate questions as you came in tonight, so if you'd like to submit a question, please raise your hand, and your card with the written question on it will be collected. In order to be fair to all candidates and to make a good use of our time tonight, we ask you to withhold your applause until the very end. Also this evening you received some materials from the Speak Your Piece Civility Project. One is a green colored card that lists the 9 tenets of civility. On one side of the white sheet you also received is a listing of expectations of you, the audience members, as this forum proceeds. The other side has 5 questions regarding civility that we ask you complete. Volunteers will collect these completed evaluations as you leave today's forums. Because the League of Women Voters has structured this forum in a way that promises civility, this is a civility certified event. Speak Your Piece Civility Project is an initiative of the Duluth Superior Area Community Foundation. The foundation thanks the League of Women Voters, the candidates, and you, the audience members, for your cooperation. Would like to, at this point, introduce the candidates for 7B House. We have Jay Fosle closest to me. In the middle is Traveler Silvers, and on the end is Erik Simonson. We will try to get this completed in an hour. If we don't quite make it, Jay Fosle indicated that he needed to leave right at 8 o'clock, so we'll do our best to get as much of that done as we can in the amount of time that we have. The order of the candidate speaking was determined by a drawing of numbers. We'll start with Erik Simonson, then Jay Fosle, and Travis Silvers. So for opening statements, we'll start with Erik Simonson. Each has a minute and a half. Thank you, Erik.
Thank you. I want to thank the Morgan Park community for having us out here tonight, and I want to thank the League for moderating this event. I expect that it'll be well run, and it'll be good, and it'll be worth your while. My name is Erik Simonson. I am the DFL endorsed candidate for Minnesota House 7B. We are approximately 58 days into this campaign, and we have exactly 20 days to go, but not like we're counting it all. But it's been fast. Obviously, I don't think neither Jay or myself certainly intended on running for this position, but circumstances being what they are, here we are in front of you today. It's been a great campaign, and I'm really excited about this opportunity to represent the folks in 7B, the western half of Duluth. As I made my way through the city, knocking on doors, talking to folks, I've really kind of refined what my top 3 issues are for this campaign, and they really are jobs, education, and property taxes. And hopefully during the course of tonight, I will get an opportunity to speak about each one of those. But I am excited to run, and I'm happy to be here, and hope to answer all the questions that you have. Thank you.
My name is Jay Fosle. I've been married to my beautiful wife, sitting right next to Dan O'Neill there, for 29 years. I have twins that are 19 years old and graduated school last year and are off to college, which I miss them very dearly. I'm hoping that I can represent you, because I want to be a voice for all the people, not just one side or the other. And I have experience. I've been on the City Council for 4 years and 9 months. I'm the Public Safety Committee Chairperson. I'm on the Duluth Economic Development Authority. I'm a past chair of the Public Works Department. And I was on the Metropolitan Interstate Council as a city representative. So I have a lot of experience going into this. Like Erik said, I had no plans of running on this until the Carrie Gauthier incident. And in fact, Carrie and I were working together on an issue, which was the floods out in Fond du Lac, one day prior to this, to get the proper paperwork so that the city of Duluth could read that these homes out there weren't going to be condemned. So Carrie, to say a nice statement for him, he was actually working very hard for the people with me right before that incident and as that unfolded.
Good evening. My name is Travis Silvers. It's nice to see you all here tonight. And I'll just introduce myself. I'm a married man. My wife's here tonight. I've got 2 boys, and I've got a sweet little 17-month-old, I think she's 18-month-old now, little girl, and she's a little sweetheart, and I love her to death. I love my family, and I'm a small business person. I've done independent contracting, construction work. I've also run a small interstate trucking company, and I've also done rental property management. My wife has run a licensed child daycare. So I know what it's like to work hard. I know what it's like to work all day and then come home at the end of the day. And when the year is over, you know, you don't spend a lot of time with your kids. You don't have a lot of time to do the things you'd like to do, and then you pay taxes for the privilege of doing that. I'll point out, and it's no shot against Erik or Jay, but I'm the only person who doesn't work for the government in this race. I do have private sector experience, and I believe it's private sector jobs that we need to see turn around in this area. We've seen a lot of private sector jobs leave our area. I think we've got a really bad reputation up here for being anti-business. We've seen things like the Superwood plant disappear. We've seen the steel mill years ago, diamond tool, the cement plant, and other private sector jobs leave this area. And I'd like to see that reputation we have up here turned around. And I'd like to see the mining jobs that we've seen trying to open up on the range. I'd like to see that process expedited.
Thank you. During the next portion of the forum, the candidates will respond to questions submitted by our co-sponsors. The questions that will be asked this evening were not given to candidates in advance. So question 1, each one will have a minute and a half to answer the question. So question 1, do you support the proposed constitutional amendment to require photo ID? If you do support it, how would you implement the requirements of this amendment? If you don't support, please give your reasons for not supporting. Jay?
Me first? Well, I'm not going to tell anyone if I support or do not support this because it's putting the cart before the horse. There's nothing to really vote on as a legislator because we don't know the outcome until November 6th. The citizens are going to vote on this, and that's true democracy, to find out exactly how they feel. So I will not answer that. That is like asking me who I'm going to vote for in a president or Congress or anything else. I feel that after November 6th, we'll find out if we have to take any steps as a legislator towards that.
Who's next? No, I don't know what the order is. Are we going to have the people answer the same questions in the same order?
Yeah.
Okay. So Jay will always answer first?
No, I have the order. So when he started, so you will be next and then you're
Okay, that gave me time to shut the ringer off on my phone, so thank you. All right, I think that the photo ID is a great idea. I think it's just common sense. I think it's just ridiculous to think that you wouldn't require somebody to use a photo ID when we're doing something that's so important as voting for our leaders. And when you look at the fact that we're a free world, we're a free nation, we're the top of the leading industrial nations, and we're one of the only industrial nations in the world that doesn't control their voter process. And I would say Minnesota is probably one of the most insecure states. We're one of only 2 states that allows same-day registration and also vouching. And if you look at what's happened in other states, they say, well, this is going to hurt people. It's going to cause people not to go out and vote. Wherever they've instituted photo ID, it's actually increased voter turnout. Furthermore, people say, well, the cost is just going to be too great. Again, it's another red herring. It's a distraction. The fact of the matter is Indiana, a state with a similar size voting population, has instituted it. And they had about 4,000 of these what you call provisional ballots. Well, if you look at Minnesota, there's about 4,000 precincts in Minnesota. So that works out to about one ballot per precinct. And I don't think that's going to require a whole lot of extra election judges. So I think that there's been a lot of exaggeration, a lot of fear-mongering, and a lot of misinformation. But the truth of the matter is we need to protect our election. You need a photo ID to do anything from buying liquor to getting on an airplane. And it's not that hard to get an ID. The state's going to pay for it. It's common sense. We need to support it. And people are not going to be disenfranchised. It's just misinformation. Do I still have time? Yeah, so vote yes on photo ID. Vote yes on a marriage amendment. Thank you.
I support a no vote on this particular constitutional amendment. I want to make 2 points very clear. We don't have a problem here in Minnesota. We don't have a voting problem here in Minnesota. This is something that's being attempted in order to disenfranchise voters. There's no way to get around that it's going to have a negative effect on voters. Anytime, my second point will be, anytime that the legislature wishes to put something before the voters in terms of a constitutional amendment, that amendment should come forward from the legislature with bipartisan support. We didn't have that in this case. This is a case of a party that wishes to put something before you, wishes to get something accomplished, but they don't have the way to get it done outside of the process that they've elected to utilize. So I'm going to vote no. I ask you to vote no. We do not have a problem here in Minnesota. We've had, in the last couple of years, we've had 100 to 200 cases of fraud. Every one of them was a felon. Every one of them had a photo ID. This isn't going to solve that problem. This is going to create problems. It's going to disenfranchise voters, and we're going to carve 200,000 people out of the process across the state. We're going to vote no.
Question 2. We will start this with Travis. You'll answer first, then Erik, and then Jay will finish on this one. So the question is, what do you think can be done about the underfunding of schools? Would you have an alternative plan to address budget shortfalls that doesn't include postponing payments to schools?
Thank you for the question. I can see inherent in the question there's built a bias that schools are underfunded. I'd say that number one, school funding, I don't know that that's a fair assumption to just go into the question saying schools are unfunded. What do we do to fix the problem? If we look at what's going on down in Chicago, I think they've settled the settlement now, but the teachers who are going on strike, these are teachers who are making $75,000 a year before benefits. And they go on strike. Their schools are some of the most underperforming schools in the nation. And they're out there picketing saying, wait, well, we need more money. Well, is that going to solve the problem? Do we just keep pouring money on something that's not working? How did that work for the Wall Street bailouts? And how did that work for GM? I think we need to really take a look at how we spend money in this state. The question of the school budget shift, yeah, I think that's a bad idea. But we have to remember how that shift got here. For the last 2 decades, the shift funding formula actually was at 90-10. And then in the 2010 DFL-controlled legislature, they went ahead and they shifted the funding to a 70-30. And then from there, to balance the budget in this last biennium, they took it and they Dayton recommended, let's go to a 50-50 shift. Well, they negotiated that back about halfway, and they went ahead and went with that. So it went from $2 billion shift to a $2.7 billion shift. Well, because of the economy recovering and the ability to pay back on the shift, there was $318 million that was paid back on that already. And I think if we continue to do things that cause the economy to grow, we expand the private sector, we're going to see that shift paid back, and we're going to see the revenue go up, and that's not going to be by raising tax rates.
I think that we need to have some clarity about this whole entire shift conversation. And, you know, we have different perspectives, and that's fine. I understand that. But my position is this. If there's one investment that the state of Minnesota can make with public dollars, it is in public K-12 education. That should be our #1 top priority. When we talk about creating jobs, when we talk about creating qualified workforces, it's the kids that we teach from K to 12 that feed into the higher education system, that feed into the job market. That's where we make our investment. And we have failed miserably in that aspect. Here in Duluth, we have wonderful facilities now. I have a daughter that goes to Piedmont School, and I have one that attends the new Lincoln Park Middle School. Both great facilities. The problem is there's not enough funding to keep programs going. We all saw the article in the newspaper about the size of the classes. It's ridiculous. We have to do something about this, and we have to fund. Where does the money come from? That is the ultimate question. I support full funding of K-12 education without a question. I support automatic increases in K-12 education based on, you know, things that need to happen every single year. We don't need to revisit this every single year. But where does the money come from? I'm the only one up here that's got a plan to do that. It's not about taking away from somebody else. It's about raising revenue responsibly in Minnesota and not shifting it onto the middle class, which is what has happened.
The school districts for quite some time have been not getting the proper funds, which means that they're getting hit threefold. What I mean by that is if they don't get the proper money right from the start, then they're not going to create the 1% interest off of that. So then they have to go out and take out a loan, and then they have to pay 1% interest. So first they didn't get the proper money. Second, they get hit because they're not making interest off of it. And third, they have to pay interest. That's what's wrong with the whole thing. It is under every state's obligation to fund education. Over half the budget goes to education already. I seriously think that in committee meetings we could find a way to fund the schools. And Eric, you're absolutely right. That article in the paper, 48 kids in a classroom, kids are dibs in the windowsill and sitting on the floor. Is that what we need for our operating budget? I don't think so. And that's not just happening here in Duluth, that's happening throughout the whole state. So those are the types of things that we have to do, is get in the committee meetings and sit down and address the situation. So that's it.
The next, Erik is going to start the next round of questions, and then Jay and Travis will end. The question is, with this being a budget year, how would you propose that we balance the budget in a way that preserves key services and invests in the future? Which revenues would you raise and/or what cuts would you make?
Minnesota State Legislature in 2013 is going to face approximately a $5 billion deficit. How many times over the last 5 to 8 years have we heard that the legislators walking into a deficit? This is a structural problem that needs to be corrected once and for all. We have this continuous shifting or kicking the can down the road, and I really don't like cliches, but it's a good one. And that's what we do here. We move the problem on to the next group. And in 2013, January, we need to go to work in a bipartisan fashion. We need to have an honest discussion about how we raise revenues. We don't have a spending problem here in Minnesota. The majority of the state budget, 80%, made up of health and human services, K-12 education, higher education. K-12 needs to increase, higher ed needs to increase. We have problems in health and human services. Where are we going to cut the money? There is no place to cut the money. If you look at the dollars that are left, what do you want to do? Not have state patrol, no rest areas, we don't want to plow the freeways. There's no real place to cut money anymore. So we need to have an honest conversation about revenues, and that includes a major overhaul of the tax structure here in Minnesota. It needs to be fair, and we need to move away from this regressive system of property taxes.
Thank you. I think the question wanted to know about increasing certain areas, and I would like to see increase in our school programs of what we were just talking about, correct? The question did say?
Balancing the budget in a way that preserves key services and invests in the future.
Right, and our children are the future, and if we stop investing in our children, what are we going to have, really, seriously? We're only hurting ourselves and them by not investing in them 100%. We need to look at programs that are probably doubled and tripled up within the state Human Services Department, and check out those programs and see what's going on. Because you know what? We can all sit up here and talk about what's going to happen here, but the reality is you're never going to be able to get into every committee. You're never going to be able to look at everything on the budget in the first year, maybe not even the second year when it comes as a skeleton to you and you can amend it, because it comes with no money figures in it the second year. This is the year you set the budget. Next year it'll be a skeleton that comes. That's when you can amend the budget and really take after it and see what's going on.
The budget is a question of priorities. Sometimes there's this feeling like that the economy, this whole economy, is a zero-sum game. Well, I have you know that just because one person's rich doesn't mean that person took money from another person to get rich. There's another way to do it. If one person works hard, they can be wealthy and they don't have to hurt other people. In fact, through trade in the free market, everybody prospers when one person does well. And in that same type of thinking, sometimes we look at the budget as there's only one way to do it. We either have to raise taxes or we have to cut spending. Well, there's also another option, just like it was said in the presidential debate. We can grow the economy, and it's been done in the past. It happened in the years of John F. Kennedy, and also happened when Reagan did it. They cut the taxes, the economy grew, and revenue actually increased. And it's something we could do here in the state of Minnesota. We need to do things like expanding the private sector. We look at things like mining jobs. If you look at the status quo, we've had DFL from this area for many years down in St. Paul. And what happens is you get people who are detached, they're unrepresentative, they're not listening to the concerns of their people, and you see people who weren't supporting things like mining. And it wasn't until Chip Kravac came along and he says, we need to get PolyMet going, we need to see mining jobs opened up in here. All of a sudden, all the DFL legislators in the area started paying lip service to the fact that we need to get mining jobs going up here. It's something that we really need to address. We need to work with the private sector. We need to work with the mining companies. We need to get mining jobs that will, every job that's created in the mining industry creates 2.5 ancillary jobs that go along with that. It's something that's important to this region. We need to use our natural resources, which is logging, timber, mining, and we need to take advantage of that.
The next question, Jay, you'll start the answers first. Sometimes there are conflicting interests between job creation and environmental concerns, such as the current discussions around mining and logging. How would you find a balance between jobs and the environment?
Thank you for the question. I would have to agree with Travis that mining, we need to get back into mining, but we do have regulatory boards that make sure that we're not going to hurt the environment, and those are the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, along with the EPA, and they have to hold all mining into regulatory. You know, we have people worried about what goes in poisoning our water, for instance, but we go ahead and do it ourselves. I don't know if anyone in this room knows that we put hydrofluorosilicic acid in the water, all drinking water in the United States and France. And if you should really go look that up on your computers, hydrofluorosilicic acid and what you're drinking. I haven't drank water in Duluth since I found out they were putting it in our water. So, but I think mining is great. We're the largest shipping port in the United States by tonnage, by weight. And the jobs could trickle down into the economy, and Duluth could prosper, and the whole state would prosper if we get these mines up and running environmentally safely.
Well, I think that's an important question. How do we balance the environmental concerns with the job creation? And I think the reality is of it that when you do something, it's like I said at the last forum, the Bible makes a statement that where the ox, or where the stall is empty, or where the ox, I can't remember how it goes. In other words, where you don't have an ox, the stall is clean. But when you're trying to do something, you're trying to get work done, it makes a mess. And we clean up our messes, and that's the great thing about the United States. We go around and we are the world leaders as far as industry and innovation. It's an experiment in freedom here in the United States, and we've also seen in the past where mistakes were made and rivers were polluted and lakes were made dirty. But I think that we've seen things change, we've seen things cleaned up, and we're a country that cleans up our messes. And when it comes down to it, we do need jobs. I mean, it's great to think that we could all live in a place where we don't burn any coal and we don't burn hydrocarbons and all these things. But at the end of the day, we have to do these things. It's energy that has lifted. It's the burning of oil and it's the burning of coal that's lifted the common man out of the plight of misery from day to day, working hard, plowing behind an animal. And there's some agenda out there, there's certain people out there that would like to see all of that go back to the dark ages, where we all just, we stay on our own yard and we grow in our own gardens and we're all poor and broke, and that's, I think it's a terrible idea. I think that we do need to be responsible, we need to clean up our messes, but when it comes down to it, human needs come first. It's the priority we have to have. We need jobs in this area. We've lost a lot of young people over the years, and that's something we need to see turned around.
Human needs do need to come first. I totally agree with you on that. And I don't say that very often, but he's right. Human needs do need to come first, but this really is a question about the balance. We need jobs here in northeastern Minnesota. There's no question about that. Nobody in here is going to argue that point. We need jobs. We need things that will keep folks working. We need good jobs so that people don't have to work 2 or 3 of them to keep their families going. We need good, middle class, well-paying jobs, and mining jobs provide that. There's no question there. The question really comes into how do we balance this damage to the environment, or the potential damage to the environment. And this process has been going on for many, many years, this permitting process. And honestly, I am not a miner. I am not a geologist. I know next to nothing about this issue in terms of what I've read in the last, year or so, that this has really kind of become a hot button issue. And if this comes before the state legislature, I guarantee you there is going to be tons and tons of questions that need to be asked, that need to be answered. Because what we don't want to do is we don't want to create jobs at the expense of our environment. We don't want to jeopardize our future for today. Saying that, I'm all about the jobs. We need to do that, but I think that there's a way to do it responsibly so that we don't damage our environment for the future, because I like to drink the water here.
We'll begin this round of questioning with you, Travis, then Erik and Jay. So the question is, in regard to healthcare reform and the development of a Minnesota insurance exchange, there is considerable discussion around the future of Minnesota Care Program. What direction do you think our public health care programs should take?
Thank you for asking that question. The healthcare question is a very real question. I think we're all aware that a few years ago Obamacare was passed, and that requires the formation of state exchanges. And some have criticized and said, well, the Republicans are doing nothing with it. They're just hoping it's going to be repealed. Well, I do hope it is repealed, because I think it's a terrible idea. I think it's the road that we're going down that's going to bring us into socialism more and more. And socialism is a failed policy. It's a policy of the past, and it's a failed policy. But as far as that goes, we might not get it repealed, and we do need to hedge our bets, so to speak, and address it today. And we do need to form an exchange with, I think it's before 2014, where the feds are going to come in and they're going to tell us, you're going to do it our way because you haven't answered the question for yourself. But I think when we do that, we also have to remember that we should also include in that an ability for the private sector to compete against the health exchanges so that they can come from the outside offering other options in a competitive environment. And that way we do follow the rules. We have our own exchange, but also there's that private sector, which I think is really the better option. Furthermore, I would say that I think we really do need to question how we just do health care. It's funny, when you buy insurance for your car, they don't cover the cost of putting gas in your car, tires on your car, oil in your car, and those are things that we don't expect insurance to do there. But when you go to your health care, all of a sudden everything's covered. I think what happens is people don't have skin in the game. They have somebody else paying the bill, the insurance company, and you don't go to the doctor. Where's the board on the wall that says this is how much it costs for a broken arm, this is how much it costs for this? We don't know. You have no idea what you're spending when you go there, and it makes the system unresponsive. We really need to examine how we do health care.
It's a great question. It's one of my favorite subjects is healthcare. And I totally am on board with the Affordable Care Act. I think it's a step in the right direction. I think one of the things that I've noticed as I've talked to folks around the city about this concept of an exchange here in Minnesota is that a lot of folks don't really know what that means or really understand it. And really, you got to think of it more as a marketplace, a place that you'll be able to go to and look at what's available and shop for the plan that you are interested in. When it comes down to the question, do you or do you not have skin in the game, so to speak, I think anybody in here that's paying health insurance premiums, whether you use the service or not, certainly is aware of the cost of health care. These are costs that continue to escalate on a significantly unrealistic pace, every year. You know, somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 to 12%, 15% sometimes. And these are huge increases. Nothing else is going up at that rate. And the question is why? And the question really is, here in Minnesota, how do we control costs through this exchange program? And as we move forward, I think this is a step in the right direction to a single payer system. And I think that this is a step in the right direction that the country needs to move. And I really hope that Obamacare is not repealed and that here in Minnesota we can create this exchange and we can take a step in the right direction, because number one way to reduce medical costs, get people on preventive care. Get people going to the doctor on a regular basis and you will reduce costs significantly.
The exchange has to be done and applied for by 2017. What an exchange is, it makes it available to the states to come up with their own way of doing it, and then they can get subsidies and tax credits per individual if this program continues. When this first came up and was passed, it was projected that it was going to cost $900 billion over 10 years. Now the projections have gone up to $1.7 trillion. It may take away Minnesota Care, but I'm going to tell you right now, be prepared to open your wallets, because it's going to open up a new excise tax. And it's going to be huge for everybody sitting in this room, including myself. I'm afraid that it's going to take away Medicare, because everyone right now 55 and over is going to be covered, but everyone below 55 is going to be on their own for Medicare that I've been paying into my whole life since I started working when I was 16. So now I'm worried about what's next, Social Security.
Before we get to our last co-sponsor question, I want to remind the audience about the white cards that you've got. The next section will be audience questions, so if you have a question, this is your chance to ask the candidates something specifically. So take a few minutes, write your question down on the card, and then maybe just raise your hand, and one of us will come and get your card. So this is the last co-sponsor question. Eric, you're going to start the question, then Jay and Travis will end. The question is, the area encompassing District 7B experienced devastating flooding, leaving many people with condemned property and minimal financial options. With natural disasters on the increase, how do you propose to minimize the future impact of these events?
In my job, I'm the assistant chief with the Duluth. I'm an assistant chief with the Duluth Fire Department. I've been with the fire department for 22 years. Assistant chief, essentially what their position is that we have 3 of them, and they're essentially a shift commander. I've got 42 firefighters that work for me on the days that I go to work. I was on duty the night that the flood hit, so I know firsthand exactly what happened that night. I saw it. We had more calls for service that night than we typically have in a 4-day period. So I understand and I see the impact of what happened with our infrastructure. I see the impact of what happened here with the unique geography that we have in Duluth. And when we talk about the potential for things to happen again in the future, you know, there's been some discussion that this is a once in a lifetime or a twice in a lifetime event. Well, the fact of the matter is our climate is changing and we have to accept that. And with that comes the risk of events such as that happening again. So I think as a legislature, we need to be cognizant of that. And as we create policy and rules, statutes, and we look at agencies that govern things like stormwater, we need to make sure that we are putting policies in place that will support, as much as we can, more significant events. Because what I saw that night, we don't want to see that again. We do not want to see that again, and we can help to minimize that. We certainly can't eliminate it, but we can minimize that with the creation of better policy.
I'm sorry, I didn't know I was next. I was on duty also all night, bailing my basement out for 5 hours. This question is kind of like asking us if we could afford to put a dome over the city. Seriously, I mean, what can we do to stop the weather? That's a really tough question. I don't think anybody in this world could answer that question, what we could do to stop the weather or what's going to happen with the weather. And no matter what policy that we put into place is not going to stop any weather event, from a tornado to flooding to anything. Maybe we could look at some emission problems that we might have, like diesel particulates that are going out into the sky. But that's probably going to be about my best answer for this question, because I don't know anyone that can stop any weather event.
The question of flooding obviously is a very relevant question when you look at the effects that we've had in our city. Again, I think that Jay made a good point there. There's not a lot we can do to control the weather. The comment was made about climate change and the fact that we're going through climate change. Well, I'd just like to point out to everybody that there was a new study that just was released, and they said in the last 16 years, if you look at the chart and it's averaged out, there is no evidence of warming. Now, I'm not saying that that doesn't mean the globe isn't warming, but that sure puts a big question out there. The fact of the matter is, and Erik even said this, you can't eliminate all risks. But I think as a whole, when we look at what happened, I think that we've seen a really good response to what happened with the flooding. You can't prepare for all the contingencies of things that can go wrong. But we see in a state, in a city, in a community where people responded. I think people were helping each other. And the thing I think we also have to look at when you look at something that happens in a disaster is sometimes there's this feeling like, well, we need to rebuild quick, we need to get things open again. And I understand that. There is a certain amount of that does have to happen. But there's a man I know who lives by a small stream who when the flood came, the stream washed the road out next to his house. And he was talking about how they began to talk about rebuilding. And they said, well, we're going to do this little temporary job, and that's going to get it go open again, and things are going to be good. And he says, then he talked to this other engineer who says, well, if we do that, what's going to happen is later on when we're going to fix it right, they're going to say, well, this isn't a priority, it's going to get skipped over, and then you say 40 years from now we have another flood, and the thing's going to wash out again. And I think that's something we do have to be careful about, is that we spend money wisely, and we look at the long term and not just a quick fix.
Our next portion is for audience questions, and the question will start with Jay, then Travis and Erik. The question is, what are Duluth's biggest opportunities and biggest threats that you can work on as 7B representative? So what do you see as opportunities and threats for 7B?
Our opportunities are job creation. We have job Z zones throughout the city of Duluth, and we have them in 7B. We have one down on Garfield. A job Z zone was what created Iconics that's sitting right up here that we see daily. Those are things that we need to push, is getting someone in here. But the problem is, and this would be the threat, is that we haven't invested into our infrastructure. We have 100-year-old pipes in the city of Duluth, so how do you have somebody willing to come here and invest into our infrastructure and then be shut down all the time? In fact, at the last forum, I had 8 emails of water main breaks that day. That was right before the last forum on Thursday. So, Job Z Zone, push that, but let's get money for our infrastructure and really invest in our infrastructure. And once we do, then the jobs will come.
Threats and opportunities for the future. I think that one thing we could address in the future is regulation. And I think that's one of the things that does hurt us in a state. When you ask a business owner, what is the thing that you would do first if you could improve the climate for business? Should we reduce taxes or should we reduce regulation? And I think any business owner would say, number one, let's reduce regulation first, because it stands in the way to innovation. It's like a monkey on your back. It's a weight that you have to carry. And it stifles that free market thinking, that free market development and opportunity. I think we do need regulation for certain things, but I think the tendency is to kick it into high gear and we over-regulate. And I can come up with a very personal example on that. I bought a house not too long ago up in the Duluth Heights neighborhood. It was a condemned house. And in the process of doing that, I've learned a lot of things. I've learned about how much the city hall can fight against you and trying to fix your own place. And I've also learned that there's state regulations in place that prevent the guy from being able to work on his own place. place. They force you to hire these contractors come in, licensed contractors. Well, I didn't know that. I bought the place thinking, hey, I'll be able to work on this place. I'll be able to get a leg up, be able to get ahead in this world. And you find out there's all these rules in there that force you to hire these licensed guys to protect their jobs. And I think that's wrong. I say, why do we have these inspectors for? They could come and look at it. I can do the work. They can tell you if you did it right or wrong. And then we move on. That's what I bought the house for. I want to fix it up. It would help me. It would help my family. It'd help the community because the house would look better. It would be not a blight to the community. It'd help City Hall because we'd increase the tax rolls. Another thing we could do is do things like, not like the red plan, where we'd allow people to have a voice in the future of their education of their children. And I think that's why we don't have funding in the schools today and we have 48 kids per class, because we're shifting $5 million over to the building fund and out of the general fund.
It's a great question, and I see a lot of opportunity here in Duluth, and I've kind of narrowed it down to my top 4. Number 1 is going to be jobs, and that should always be our number 1 opportunity, and something that we all strive for to create and retain here in Duluth. But the legislature is not in a position to create jobs. That is not what we can do. But what we can do is we can affect policy that supports the private sector developing jobs and creating jobs. And we need to have common sense when we put regulations and things like that in place, so that private business wants to, start a company, open a business, move a plant here, whatever the case may be. We need to support that, but we need to do it in a responsible fashion. So I'm all about the jobs. Number 2, our workforce. We have here in Minnesota one of the most qualified workforces across the country, and I doubt that anybody's going to argue that. But we are taking steps backwards. And why are we taking steps backwards? Because we're not investing properly in our education system. And you're going to see the effects of that for years and years to come until we get back on track. Number 4 is infrastructure. This is a significant opportunity. When you talk about new business and who wants to come here and who wants to open or who wants to build here, the number 1 thing that they look for is infrastructure. Is there transportation? Do we have good roads? Do we have good sewer? Do we have good water? Do I have good utilities? Are the schools good? Education? All of these things feed into that. When we talk about threats to Duluth, property taxes. Property taxes are going up too quickly, too high. Middle class is paying far too much. And my final point.
The second audience question, we'll start with Travis on this round, then Erik and Jay. We see that the Lake Walk extension is currently continuing at a good pace. Do you support the efforts underway to create a cross-city connector trail from the Munger Trail to the Lake Walk?
Well, I would just say that, I'm not too much up on the Lake Walk. I think that probably is more of a city council issue. What we're running for today is the state legislature. I mean, I'm not saying that doesn't have an impact in it, but I've been focused more on state issues, so I don't really have an answer for that. But I would say that, obviously the Lake Walk is a nice addition to our city. I think that helps with tourism, but I think this idea that we're just going to rely on tourism as our greatest industry and our only hope to save this area, I think is just ridiculous. I think that the jobs are too low pay, and it's great if you own a hotel, and it's great if you own a restaurant, you're going to make fine money, but in the end, we do need to look at other ways to turn around the economy up here. And I agree with both Jay and Erik that does involve infrastructure, and it does involve having a good education system, and I think some of the ways we can address that is we hold teachers accountable, and I think that all too often teachers aren't being held accountable. We have things like tenure, and we have things like last in, first out, so that if a teacher is performing poorly, if they got in first, they get to stay, and when somebody gets cut, who is it that gets cut? It's the new teachers who might have fresh blood, new ideas, innovation, and they get cut, but we hold on to the old teachers who aren't maybe doing as well. I think teachers need to be held accountable for the results, and I think we need to give parents choice in that. Parents should have a choice whether they want to send their students to a public school that's a failing institution or to go to other places, and I think that provides competition, a model that's been proven by the free market to increase your product return, the return on your investment. It increases the value you get for the dollar you spend. And I think whenever we can incorporate free market principles in the turning around economy, I think that's our best options.
Can you read the question again, please?
We see that the Lake Walk's extension is currently continuing at a good pace. Do you support efforts underway to create a cross-city connector trail from the Munger Trail to the Lake Walk?
One thing I've learned in the last however many days is that you need to be very careful in stepping on city politics when you're running for state office. However, I will say this, that as a resident of Duluth and a taxpayer of Duluth, I think it's a great idea. I think it's a great investment. I think it's a draw for our community, and if we can have the ability to connect that, I'm 100% in favor of it. If there's something that comes before the legislature in terms of maybe a bonding request or something to that effect, I certainly would support it. But I do agree with, I support the concept, and I again, defer to the city on the particular.
And I was on the board for the Cross City Trail for quite a few months, and this is kind of a city issue, or almost 100%, but they do get money from DNR, which is state. So when they collect DNR grants, which they've got $500,000 here just not long ago, that would be a legislation decision. I agree with the Cross City Trail 100%. I was on there. The only problems we're going to have is connecting down by the new Clyde Park, and that area is going to be tough. I suggested that we go underneath the freeway at that point, but we'd have to have some really safety issues going on there with lighting and stuff, because boy, someone could get in a lot of trouble down in there if we did that. So it's going to be a jargon to get through there, but we're working on. Well, they're still working on it. There was a bridge there right on about 34th Avenue West that was to be torn down. That didn't happen yet. That's still sitting there. So hopefully they can get rid of that and keep moving with this trail and get it through.
Okay, we are running just a little bit ahead of time, so we're going to start our closing statements now. Each candidate will have a minute and a half to present their closing statements. It's going to start with Erik, and then Jay and Travis will end.
First of all, I want to say thank you to everybody for coming. It's a great opportunity, and it gives you a chance to maybe get some information from the candidates and draw your own conclusions as to the differences between the candidates. A couple of comments that I want to make, and it's just really about some of the things that we've talked about here tonight. My background is in crisis management, and that's really what I do on a day-to-day basis, and I make decisions in a very short period of time by looking at as much information as I possibly can in a very few seconds, typically. This process that we're talking about, going down to St. Paul to represent 7B, we have the ability to spend a lot of time considering decisions and taking in input, and that's really what I'm all about. I don't pretend to know everything, and I don't pretend to be good at everything. When something comes before me as a legislator, it's my intent to reach out to the community, to the groups that are affected, and try to find out what the impact is going to be to you all. And that's how I operate. That's how I plan to operate. I will represent all of the people in 7B, not just Democrats, and I'm proud of that. And we'll do that, and we'll do a good job. But I want to make sure that decisions that I make, votes that I take, aren't necessarily about what the DFL party wants. It's about what Duluth wants, and it's about what's best for Duluth. So I'm excited for this opportunity. Again, I want to thank you for the opportunity to come here tonight, and don't forget to vote on November 6th.
It is a known fact that I can work with both sides to come up with a good outcome for all the citizens of Duluth and 7B also. We need to stop the gridlock that's going on down at the state, where both sides lock their heels in and they're not really there for all the citizens. They're there for one side or the other. I plan on working with both sides, because that's why I'm running as an independent candidate. They're both going to have to lobby for my vote. And we have to stop taking away from our children the public education funding. It's not only hurting us, but it's also hurting our future with debt. And there's too much of wants and needs. There's a lot of wants going on. We have $37 billion budget that state took in. I think the state has a spending problem and not an income problem. That's a lot of money to be running a state. Seriously is, people. You know, public education, we were known for the #1 when I graduated from high school in the whole nation. Minnesota had the highest school rate and people going to work. And now we're dropping down because we take money away from that public education, and it has to stop. We have to support jobs and infrastructure, to create a tax base and take the burden off the citizens. And I hope you can find in your hearts to write in Fosle.
Well, again, I'd like to thank you all for coming, and I've enjoyed this little forum. I'd just like to point out the fact of who I am. I'm not afraid to stand by the things I believe in. I think you could ask me any question, and I could give you at least a general idea of where I stand on an issue. I am a conservative candidate. I don't shy away from that. I feel that that's nothing to be ashamed of. Maybe in this area, sometimes people feel ashamed of that, but it's nothing to be ashamed of because I think we bring solutions to the table, ideas that work. I think that our case is that, you know, there's not some new ideas that are going to change society and make things better, but I say let's draw from the deep well of the time-tested methods that have proven effective. Ideas from the past aren't necessarily bad just because they're old, and I'm talking about things like marriage. I think when you do things that protect the family, that strengthen the family, those are things that are good for our children. Better than any teacher can do for your education is to raise a kid in a stable home. And I think you see that has real world effects on what happens to children. And it's things that we do in the family, and it's legislation that directly affects the family. I don't believe in things like leadership from the behind. I think that that's a bad policy. I think we need to take our ideas out. We need to sell them. You don't force ideas on people. You don't make people come to your side of the boat, but you have to sell your ideas, and that's what true leadership is. It's not just putting your finger out to the wind and saying, which way is the wind blowing today? But it's saying, this is a thing that's worked. We've got a time-tested, proven method. We know that this works. We've seen it work. We've got models that show that this thing works. And I'm talking about conservative ideas, free market ideas, principles that are based in faith and things along that line. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for coming. This concludes our 7B District Candidate Forum. We hope that this program has helped you learn about the candidates and their positions on issues of importance to you so that you'll make an informed choice at the polls on Election Day. To find out more about your precinct and where to vote, you can go to the League of Women Voters website at www.lwvmn.org. Put in your zip code and your home address, and you'll find out all the details that you need to know about registration, voter guides, and much more. We also have information here with us at the back of the room. So thank you for coming. Remember to vote on November 6th, and we also want to let you know that the TV here in the center is going to be tuned to the presidential debate, so you're all welcome to stay and watch that if you'd like. Thank you very much.